Yeah? Yeah? Well, tell the Vulcan Advisory Council that I think their sense of fashion's illogical. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. Alright, let's go back to the beginning. Before Starfleet had it all figured out, before humanity really knew what it was going to do out there in the big wide galaxy. On this episode of Subspace Stories, my series where I randomly select a Star Trek episode to rewatch and then reflect on, we're looking at First Flight, an episode from Star Trek Enterprise's second season that takes us into Captain Archer's past to the early days of the NX program and humanity's first real steps into the stars. Let's get into it. What I love about Enterprise is that it's all about beginnings. With First Flight, we not only get to see how Archer becomes the man that we know him to be later in the show, but we also get a window into Starfleet's growing pains as it worked to break the warp barriers. It's a smaller scale story, for sure, but it's one that adds depth to Archer's character and the show's world building as a whole. In other words, it's exactly the kind of episode that keeps pulling me back to Star Trek Enterprise. This episode really digs into why Archer is so driven and passionate about Starfleet's overall mission into space. Sure, we knew his father designed the warp engine, but First Flight shows us how much this family legacy really weighs on Archer. Throughout the episode, you see his frustration, his ambition, and his absolute determination to make humanity a true spacefaring civilization. That personal touch makes him more relatable to me, and honestly, it's one of the reasons I think he's actually one of the more underrated captains in the Star Trek franchise. One of my favorite things about Star Trek Enterprise continues to be how it portrays the early days of Starfleet. It's fascinating to see Earth's struggle to break the warp barrier and how shaky humanity's place in the galaxy felt back then. Episodes like this really lay the groundwork for everything that we come to know about Starfleet later on in the Star Trek timeline, showing us that every major milestone humanity had started more or less as an uphill battle. It continues the message that I feel all of Star Trek is ultimately trying to drive home across the whole franchise. Human determination and our ability to collaborate is a beautiful thing. Even in dark times, Star Trek believes that people are always capable of coming together for a common goal, such as breaking into deep space. Next, we pretty much have to talk about the classic Starfleet captain trope that this episode displays, stealing ships. I love that even back when warp flight was still experimental, Starfleet officers were still taking matters into their own hands. Some folks kind of think that it's a little overdone in Star Trek, especially the more modern episodes at this point, but I always love it, and in this case of this episode specifically, I think it was a good decision to include it, because obviously how else were they going to get past the Vulcans shutting down the program? Overall, like I said, this is a low-stakes episode. It's not about saving the entire galaxy or repelling an invasion, although, as most of us know, Archer's crew will have their fair share of that with the Xindi as the seasons progress, but this episode is about character moments, building the lore, and really just peeling back the layers on Captain Archer more specifically. You get that satisfying conclusion when the warp flight finally succeeds in the A-plot, and then when the existence of the dark matter nebula is confirmed in the B-plot. It's actually that episode that really just kind of quietly sits with you. I also love how First Flight really reflects the uneasy dynamic between humans and Vulcans at this point in the timeline. Watching Archer and T'Pol's search for the nebula while also discussing human behavior and the odd ways our friendships can be formed out of things like rivalries really gives us a glimpse at that evolving partnership between the humans and the Vulcans. And let's face it, it's always entertaining in Star Trek when Vulcans are just a little bit baffled by how erratic humans can be, and again, how oddly our relationships can be formed. Another great thing about this being mostly a bottle episode that deals with flashbacks is we also get to see how Trip and Archer actually meet, which is a great touch. My only complaint really about this episode is there's not enough Trip Tucker. We always need more Trip Tucker. Who doesn't want more Trip Tucker? Anyways, I digress. I often find myself drawn to these types of smaller scale episodes. I think it's just as much fun as it is to have crazy high stakes and space battles. Trust me, I love a good space battle. I also really enjoy a good story, great acting, and time just spent on fleshing out characters or expanding on in-universe lore, such as the humble beginnings of Starfleet. So, yeah, that's First Flight, an episode that reminds us where it all started, gives us a great look at Captain Archer's roots, and lets us get back into those early Starfleet struggles. I'm curious, what did you think of First Flight? Have you seen this episode? If not, you should. Are you drawn to these more character-driven episodes like I am, or do you prefer the higher stakes adventures and grand space battles? Or maybe a little bit of both? Either way, drop your thoughts in those comments, and if you enjoyed this review, hit the like button, share the video, give me a subscription, or follow along for more. I got Star Trek videos, fandom commentary, sometimes I talk about emo music, sometimes I'm throwing out some niche memes. We got almost a little bit of everything here. So with that said, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time, and let's just end it with a classic, live long and prosper.